Well, it has come to my attention that a lot of people that own C3 Corvettes haven't driven them in decades. So in this video, I have another customer's car. This is a 1976 Corvette. And it hasn't been on the road since 2004. I don't know why all these guys that own these Corvettes, they don't get to drive them. It's actually really a shame, but I think the last 4 cars I've had in here, they've never been driven by their owners, or if they have, it's been 1 or 2 times a decade ago. But what we're going to do in this video is we're going to start this car after it's been sitting since 2004. I'll give you guys a little walk around of it. Long story short, it's been sitting a long time. Between, I believe, career and family and just life, the owner actually never got to drive it. It sat outside for a long time. But yeah, it's going to need a lot of work, but that's what people bring me, is cars that need lots of work. Weirdly enough, like, the doors look like they're a different color than the rest of the car, but anyway, it'll need cleaned up. We're planning on getting running and driving and stopping, then doing some interior work. I have a bunch of parts inside the car that I need to get out and put into a pile. Here's the engine bay. It hasn't really been touched since 2004, but luckily it looks fairly complete and fairly clean. The only thing that really stands out to me are the house wiring connectors, and the distributor is a little wonky, but that just could be installation error. Oh, that alarm thing, that stuff's got to go. So, step 1 for any engine like this is we are going to drain the oil. We're going to see what it looks like. We'll replace it and the filter, and then we'll pull the spark plugs, see what those look like, and then see if we can't turn the engine over by hand. I'm pretty sure this one is not seized up, just because, well, I don't really know. I'm really hoping that this engine is not seized up. It really shouldn't be, but you just never know. One thing I don't like about these exhaust headers, they have the emissions tubes. They shouldn't have had by 76, but that just makes getting these spark plugs out a million times harder. We're going to have to do it from the bottom. I can see a potential problem already, which we did know about. The transmission is leaking, and leaking a lot. Alright, let's see where it's leaking from. Weirdly enough, it's been painted orange. So that means it's probably been messed with in the past. You'd hope that if they had rebuilt it or something, it would have done a better job. Alright, I saw an active drip from here. That looks like selector shaft seal and or pan gasket, or both. Those will get done. We're leaking from the speedo housing. The rear seal looks okay. Anyway, that's not what we're doing today, but that is something that will be on the list. Today we'll be draining the oil, and I guess really just looking for other issues that this car has. Somebody put a catalytic converter on it. I don't know why they did that. Other than that, it looks pretty good. Don't see anything really crazy so far. But yep, we'll drain this oil and we'll see what kind of issues we have with it. Looks like changing the spark plugs is going to be easier from underneath, at least in the back too, than from the top. Same will probably be for this side. Let's see. Yeah, the tops are almost impossible to get. I got AC pump's gonna have to come off. So step 1 is gonna be draining this oil. Don't worry, I do have an oil pan. You just can't see it. Remember, oil floats on top of water, so if there's any water in it, you'd see it when it first came out. Luckily, it's just old and black. I really need to get a pan that's not black so you can see how clean or not the oil is. Oh. I guess I'm not surprised that's stuck. Yum. It's always a common question on what oil to use on an engine that you're starting for the first time. This is my opinion. A lot of people will disagree with it, but I'd use basically the cheapest stuff you can get. So this is SuperTech Conventional out of Walmart. It's probably $12, $13 for 5 quarts. And honestly, it's the same as any kind of O'Reilly's brand or AutoZone brand or Napa brand that you can buy. I've had people in the past say, oh, you're an idiot for using this oil. Well, guess what, guys? This motor, we know zero about it. It could knock, it could have overheated, and there could be lots and lots of issues with it. Why would you put $45 of brand new oil in an engine you have no idea about? So that's why I use this, because one, it's cheap, it's not wasting money, and two, once the engine gets through a couple heat cycles, guess what? It's going to be changed out anyway, and it won't do any kind of damage to it. These engines, they all have 100,000 miles on them. You know, it's not a big deal. So that's the oil that I use on an engine that I know nothing about. With the filter full of oil and reinstalled, put the rest of the motor oil in the engine. Something that I don't normally do, but I'm going to do on this car, is remove this AC compressor. For one, there's no refrigerant in it. Two, this clutch is really hard to turn, it's chunky, and there's no belt on it. So obviously, the air conditioning is not working. So this compressor, I'll put in a box, I'll throw it in the back of the car. When we get to that point, we can get to that point. I believe the owner eventually wants to do vintage air, so it's got to go anyway. Plus, with that out, I can actually get to these spark plugs. The compressor is held into the brackets with 3 large bolts in the back and then 2 smaller bolts on the bottom and then your adjuster bolt right here. And once you get all those things out of the way, without pinching your fingers, hopefully, you can take it out. Yep, you can get to the spark plugs now. I don't know if I'm going to leave these brackets or what. I'll probably just leave them because you can still get to the spark plugs now that the compressor is gone. The plugs that I pulled out are actually pretty close to what I expected. There's maybe one on the number 6 cylinder that has a little bit of oil that it was burning, but all the rest are either rich or, well, they're all rich, but I don't know how long these plugs were ran. They're cool split fire plugs. I don't think that does anything, but the electrode has a little split in it. Anyway, so what we were looking for is damage to any of the plugs, anything really oil fouled or something really, really lean. But I mean, from what it is, I think these are good. It's a good indicator. So now we will oil up all the cylinders, and then we will turn it by hand and see if we can get it to turn. Alright, let's see if this engine will do. I'm pretty sure it will turn. Yep. Yep. Go all the way around one time. That's good enough for me. What I want to do, just in case, I don't think it needs it, but just to be safe, what I want to do is I want to pop these valve covers off and just watch all the valves move. And then once we verify everything's moving, we don't have any valves that are stuck. It took a little while to get the valve covers off. I had to remove yet another AC bracket, so out of the 4, 2 of them are removed. But this side, there's oil in it because obviously I changed the oil. Let me show you the other side. This is pretty common for an engine that's been sitting a very long time. There's no oil in the rocker arm, there's no oil at all. It's completely dry. What I will do is I will turn the engine over by hand, watch all the valves, make sure everything moves, make sure I don't have anything stuck, and then from there we can bump it over with the starter and we can see if we can't get oil up to the top of the engine. The one thing that I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to put a rubber line on the fuel pump and run it into a can in case there's anything in the tank. I honestly haven't even checked. I'm sure this tank is full of crap. You won't be able to see any of it, but you can always, yeah, you can see in there, or at least I can see in there. There is liquid in there. Doesn't smell like varnish, which is surprising, but who knows how old it is. Eventually that will need, okay, it hit me. Woo! It hit me. It's stinky. So eventually we're going to have to go through the fuel system, but we're not there yet. First we're going to make sure that everything inside the motor moves. I have a little electric fuel pump that I use to drain the tank. I will be doing that next, but for this part, I just grabbed the hose off of it and attached it to that line. So it runs through the inner fender and then into this bucket. So any kind of gas, if the fuel pump still works, if it makes it to the engine, will get put out in this bucket. After that, I'll probably end up draining the tank. There's not much left in it, but there's still enough that it will probably make it to the engine. So now we can put a battery in it, we can spin it over and see what it will do. Let's see what happens when we turn the key. Annoying buzzers. Well, it would help to be in park. That would help. Let's see now. That's good. Sounds good. No oil yet, and I'm not surprised just because it usually takes a little while for the lifters to pump up. But what I will probably do is I'll probably put a little bit of oil on all the ends and then put the plugs in and get it to fire up. One thing that we need to do before we even bother to start up this engine is we need to drain the gas tank. So there's quite a bit of gas still left in here, and it's kind of brown and sludgy. So we're going to get as much out as we can first, and then we'll see what we can do to take the, without dropping the tank, hopefully we can clean it. I'm hoping that we can maybe take the cylinder out. It might come through the top, it might not, but we'll just have to see once we get the boot off. But we'll get as much gas as we can out of here and hope for the best. Alright, long story short, my electric fuel pump is garbage. That's the second one that's been garbage. So I just did the gravity feed method. So basically, if you have liquid going from one height to another height, it will travel all the way down. I used the vacuum to get suction on the tube. It's a long enough tube that I was able to watch the gas come out, and I was able to disconnect the vacuum before the vacuum sucked any of it up. But we have drainage and it's coming out. I have my tube zip tied to a big long drill bit, and it's at the very bottom of the tank, so it should suck everything out. Alright, it's about 5 minutes later, and as you can see, The gas tank is as empty as it's going to get. So we have almost 5 whole gallons of gas. That's a lot. That should be enough gas that now what we can do is we can connect all the fuel lines, connect the fuel pump, and then once we get the engine spinning over, we can spit out all the gas that's in the lines and in the pump, and then when it becomes clear, then we can use it. But this stuff, pretty gross. With the gas tank emptied and cleaned out as best as I could without dropping it, we have 5 gallons of fresh that we're going to be putting in it. The other thing that I plan on doing is I have the fuel pump hooked up to a rubber hose. Basically what's going to happen, it's going to pump gas from the tank into here. What it's going to do is going to clean out the little bit that's left in the lines, spit out in this jug, and then once we verify that fresh gas is getting pumped out, then we can hook it up to the carburetor. You'll also notice I have these nifty valve covers on here, so I keep these around for doing engines just like this to verify I have oil coming off of all the rocker arm once the engine gets running, and without making as much as a mess as if you would just doing it freely. Don't worry, I didn't cut his valve covers open. These are ones actually from the 72 Camaro that was on my channel a couple months ago. I kept them around. They were crappy enough that they were good to cut holes into, so there they are. So we'll get this fuel system buttoned up and ready to rock and roll. So there's at least one thing I want to check before we turn the motor over and try to get it to fire. The first is going to be I need to check for 12 volts at the distributor. Usually if I get 12 volts there, most everything else usually works. So we'll test our test light on the alternator. We have it good here. So all we have to do is unplug this and test it. I just want to test it with the ignition on, and I also want to test it with the engine cranking, just because you never know. Alright, that's ignition on. That is cranking with compression. So hopefully now we can get it to fire. See what happens. Yeah, that's what I want to see. Woo! Awesome. It sounded really good, especially if we're not running for so long. I didn't hear any tapping or ticking or anything like that, so if we got any fuel out, which I doubt we did, if we got any fuel out, oh we did, we got some, that's good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep turning it over, keep letting it run, see if we can't get a little bit more of this nasty gas out. This looks like gas from the line. I usually don't use these clear fuel filters, but in this case I will, just because I need to see what kind of trash is coming up from the gas tank. I usually use fuel filters like this, but here's the tip. This one is from 2004, and you can hear the element inside of it rattling around. So it's pretty much garbage. The same goes with all these fuel hoses. They're rock hard, and you can see at the end they're just kind of cracking. So none of these fuel hoses are really safe to use. Eventually we will replace the fuel hoses and probably the fuel pump down there, but as for now, to get the engine running, we'll just replace the top that we can find. We have the fuel line, half the fuel line plumbed with the filter, so now we can get gas to the carburetor and see if it'll fire. Did you guys see that? That flooding? So we have a stuck needle and seat in the carburetor.